In the last several years, Smash has been getting more mainstream acceptance and respect as a fighting game, especially with Nintendo's explicit attention to competitive balance. It's historically struggled for legitimacy among other fighting games, as is evidenced by the fact that any major fighting game event you go to is generally divided into two groups: traditional fighting game players and Smash players. There are a lot of reasons for this, and as far as fighting games go, Smash has basically begged, "Oh yes, daddy, please criticize me," with its repeated attempts to tack Mario Party mechanics onto a fighting game foundation like tripping in Brawl, Rage in Smash 4, or the equivalent of Steve Buscemi trying to relate to children by adding either hilariously out of touch or purposely insulting things, it's hard to tell which, like For Glory or useless training modes. But the mistake to be made is confusing bad add-ons with the essence of the game. Basically, saying Smash isn't a fighting game because of goofy design choices is like saying orange juice is bad because you drank it after brushing your teeth with mint toothpaste. So, if we're gonna say one thing is or isn't a fighting game, we need to ask what exactly makes a fighting game a fighting game. Ordinarily, the definition we give for fighting games is pretty face value, where people, well, physically fight each other, along with other common mechanics to supplement the definition like life bars or meters. And this seems fair enough, but it's, for good reason, an unsatisfying definition because it still doesn't address what fighting games are, only how they usually look. And the issue here is similar to defining words by their connotation rather than their literal meaning, like the word outstanding. Most people take outstanding to mean good, like, oh, your grades are outstanding, but if this is as far as your understanding of the word goes, you might find being maced and handcuffed a weird way to be congratulated for your outstanding arrest warrant. Any dang way. That said, two characters beating each other up doesn't cut it for a definition. Is Super Mario World a fighting game because it involves physical conflict, or is it combos? I mean, you can hop on Charge and Chuck's head multiple times, so Super Mario World's got physical conflict and combos, but it probably still doesn't feel right to call Super Mario World a fighting game though. We can keep tacking on visual features of fighting games forever and still never arrive at a satisfying definition, because nothing you can see or point to makes a fighting game a fighting game. So, enough about what a fighting game is not. What is a fighting game? For you guys who've been subbed to me for a while now, you know I've talked a lot about the concept of reactability versus anticipation, and how it's the central concept in things like fundamentals and neutral. And you'll hear me talk about it at least one more time, because that's precisely the concept that makes fighting games what they are. The idea is that, contrary to overwhelmingly popular belief, the reaction time most people think of when they hear reaction time, namely the kind measured by sites like Human Benchmark or the ruler drop test, is, if within normal ranges, almost completely irrelevant to fighting game skill. This kind of reaction is called simple reaction time, or SRT, and is notoriously difficult, if not impossible, to improve. Rather, the kind of reaction time that we're interested in and is relevant to fighting game skill is called choice reaction time, aka CRT, which is not how fast you can react to a single focused task, but how fast you can make a decision among multiple options. For example, in the ruler drop test, you don't need to decide among different options, but simply react when the ruler drops so you can clasp your hand around it. On the other hand, if someone clamped electrodes to you and told you in 5 seconds they'd shout either rock, paper, or scissors, and you had to correctly make whichever they shouted else you'd get lit up, you'd take a moment to decide which gesture to make. CRT, though, can be influenced positively or negatively by mental preparedness and number of options to choose among, meaning that the fewer options to decide among and the more prepared you are to execute a given option equals better reaction time, and this notion is known as Hicks' law. But CRT also has well-defined limitations, with roughly 250 milliseconds being close to the absolute minimum time to choose among options. In essence, this means that in fighting game terms, almost everything faster than 15 frames is effectively unreactable without a strong element of prediction, and that number can easily balloon to 20 frames or more, again depending on factors that influence your CRT like number of potential choices, expectations, and so on. This leads me to my first major point. In order to land a hit on your opponent, one of two things has to happen. They have to mess up, or their ability to react to what you do has to be impaired somehow. A common way of impairing reactability, to get what I mean, is getting close to people so they have less time to react to what you do, which is how heavies generally function. They close the gap and read whatever their opponent tries to do to get out of that uncomfortable situation, and it's uncomfortable precisely because the heavy is too close for them to react to what they do, so they're under psychological pressure to do something, which is a feeling you're probably familiar with if you've ever clicked too early on a reaction time test. and though I doubt there are any studies that conclusively state as much, it seems pretty obvious that the same pressure of anticipation that makes you, I don't know, get up attack from the ledge into a Ganon forward smash despite the fact that he's been charging it for 3 whole seconds, and the pressure that makes you click prematurely on reaction time tests are the same phenomenon. Another way to impair reactability is with mix-ups, which limits your opponent's ability to anticipate what you're going to do, effectively reducing their reaction time because you're giving them more possibilities to have to quickly decide on a response against. This dynamic of finding ways to deceive your opponent by exploiting this fatal vulnerability in our wiring is unique to fighting games, and that's because, well, it's exactly what makes a fighting game. So to answer the main question here, a fighting game is anything where, due to the limitations of human reaction time and the associated psychology, we have to make use of how what we expect and anticipate influences how we behave and react, or in other words, a fighting game is anything where the win condition depends on impairing the opponent's ability to react to what you do, either to expose vulnerabilities or make them make poor decisions in anticipation. This is why fighting games have boundaries, for example, because if you had infinite space to run away, you could always stay at a range where you could react to everything someone tried to do. And same thing applies to cages in MMA and rings in boxing, and even rings in, I don't know, sumo. Now the question is, could the same be said of all competition in all games? What makes Mario Kart different from fighting games? What makes a fighting game isn't just that you interact with an opponent, but the nature of those interactions. In Mario Kart, while you are competing with other people, your interactions with them are of a completely different nature because they have nothing to do with deception based on the dynamics and psychology of reaction time. Rather, they're based on creating obstacles to a static task, namely finishing X laps around a course. And the nature of those obstacles is to devalue the opponent's technical abilities by using items to make them temporarily stop or slow down. In theory, you could not interact with your opponent directly at all, and the core of the game and competition wouldn't change, which is to say items are to Mario Kart as tripping was to Brawl. Add-ons that don't alter the principles of how you win, even if they are extremely stupid like Brawl's tripping. What about shooters? Shooters come in a rainbow of styles, and so that I don't speak out of turn, I'll use the one shooter I actually have competitive experience with, Metroid Prime Hunters. In MPH, interactions with your opponent were cyclical. You'd get in a firefight, which was a direct contest of technical skill to see who could aim better, and whoever started losing the firefight would try to retreat to find health, at which point the aggressor would try to guard the health or cut off access to it and bottleneck you. So from that, it's obvious that your ability to hit your opponent depends mostly on your aim and ability to spatially limit them, while psychological tactics to impair reaction time aren't really relevant considerations. This all said, it seems pretty clear by now that the nature of how you interact with your opponent is the exact same in Smash as it is in any other fighter. With this in mind, some people's criticisms might now evolve from Smash isn't a fighting game to Smash isn't a good fighting game. Whether a game is a good fighting game is an entirely separate question, one that I don't nearly have the stamina right now to answer, but based on what I've covered so far, I think you'd have an extremely hard time arguing that Smash isn't a bona fide fighting game that's only superficially different from traditional fighters, and that Smash players exercise the exact same fundamental skills to play their game as all fighting game players. To reuse the analogy from earlier, if we all drink orange juice, but some people choose to for some reason season theirs with mint toothpaste, our taste can certainly be called into question, but that we're all still drinking orange juice isn't up for debate. Anyway, if I haven't gotten my point across by now, I doubt bloating the video further will help that, so I think I'll leave this video where it is at the risk of indeed needlessly bloating it. Obviously, I don't think Smash players need to be convinced of the legitimacy of their game, and likewise, I think most people in general probably already agree with me. But more than anything, what I wanted to accomplish was, even though claiming Smash isn't a true fighting game isn't a common position anymore, it once was, and still is in some circles, which I think is itself reason enough to take a moment to nail down our definitions, and if we're going to argue, at least understand exactly what we're arguing about. Anyway, as always, thank you guys for watching, I appreciate your time and attention, and if you'd like to make me feel like making videos isn't a huge waste of time, then I invite you to check out my Bandcamp page, which is linked in the description, where I keep music I've composed for video games recently, and if you like whatever you hear, including the song playing in the background of this video, you can either grab it for free or pay whatever you want for it, either way's fine. I love you.